I never thought the word grateful could be used as a weapon. But that's exactly what my son turned it into. Grateful. Mom, you should be grateful we include you. Grateful we check in. Grateful we still come to Thanksgiving even though it's such a long drive. 40 years of sacrifice. And in the end, what I had to show for it was a son who thought I owed him a house because he remembered to show up twice a year. My name is Beverly Marsh. I'm 69 years old, and I used to live, in the house I built with my late husband, Ray, on the edge of Clearwater, Tennessee. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, 2 acres of land that backs up against a creek Ray used to fish every Saturday morning. We built that house with our own hands. Literally, Ray was a contractor. I was the bookkeeper, the designer, the one who picked every cabinet and tile and doorknob. We moved in when our son Marcus was 4 years old and our daughter Renee was 6 months. We poured ourselves into that house the way young parents do, believing that the walls you build around your family mean something. Ray passed 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 12 weeks from diagnosis to gone. The kind of loss that doesn't leave you the same person on the other side. After he died, I held onto the house the way you hold on to anything that still carries someone's smell. Their shape, the memory of their footsteps in the hallway at 6 a.m. Marcus lived 40 minutes away in Nashville with his wife Courtney and their 2 kids. Renee had moved to Portland years ago. She called every Sunday. She sent cards on birthdays that arrived 2 days early, not 2 days late. She was the kind of daughter who paid attention. Marcus was the kind of son who showed up when something was in it for him. I didn't want to believe that for a long time. Mothers are good at not believing things about their sons. We explain it away. He's busy. He has his own family. He's under pressure at work. We construct elaborate reasons why the people we love most treat us like furniture, present, useful, mostly invisible. But there was a moment, about a year before Thanksgiving, when the illusion cracked wide open. I'd been having some health issues. Nothing life-threatening, but a series of tests. Some uncertainty. A few weeks where I was genuinely scared. I'd called Marcus to tell him. He'd said, "Mom, you really should think about what you want to do with the house if something happens. Not, are you okay? Not, do you want me to come down? The house." That was his first thought. I told myself I'd misread the moment. Stress makes people say strange things. But then, 3 months later, he brought Courtney to visit and they spent the entire weekend measuring rooms. I'm not exaggerating. While I was in the kitchen making dinner, Courtney was in the master bedroom with a tape measure. Marcus walked the property line with his phone out, taking photos. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled and said, "Just showing Courtney the layout. She's never really looked at it properly." Looking back now, I can see exactly what was happening. I was a placeholder, a warm body keeping the property in the family until the real transfer could take place. The groundwork was being laid, and I was the last to know. The months leading up to that Thanksgiving were a masterclass in calculated affection. Marcus started calling more, not every Sunday like Renee, more like twice a month, which for Marcus was practically daily. He'd ask how I was feeling. He'd reference the house in every conversation. "Is the roof holding up okay? You should let me send someone to look at it. Mom, the property taxes on that place must be getting steep. Have you thought about your long-term plan?" Long-term plan. That phrase started appearing in almost every conversation, like a seed he was planting, watering carefully, waiting to harvest. He also started making himself useful in ways that felt generous on the surface. He sent a handyman to fix the gutters I'd been putting off. He had firewood delivered before winter. He took me to lunch twice in October, both times at nice restaurants. Both times picking up the check with a big smile. You deserve to be taken care of. Mom, that's what family's for. And here's the shameful truth. Part of me wanted to believe it. Part of me was so hungry for that attention, for that feeling of being considered, that I let myself enjoy it without examining the motive underneath. Then, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I got a call from my attorney, Walter Briggs, who'd handled Ray's estate and had known our family for over 20 years. Beverly, he said, I got an unusual call this week. Someone representing your son Marcus contacted my office asking about the process for transferring a property deed from a living parent to a child. They wanted to know whether it was possible to execute such a transfer at a private family gathering if a notary was present. I sat down on the bottom stair of my porch. The wood creaked the way it always did under my weight, the sound Ray used to hear from his office and say, "That you, Bev?" "Walter," I said slowly, "what exactly did they ask?" They wanted to know if a quitclaim deed could be signed over dinner. Informally, in front of family, whether the presence of witnesses at the table could substitute for a formal notarization in certain circumstances. The calculation of it stunned me. He wasn't just going to ask me. He was going to engineer a moment, surrounded by family, holiday warmth, the pressure of the table, the expectation that a mother says yes to her son when everyone is watching. He was going to use Thanksgiving dinner as a closing table. "Walter," I said carefully, "can you draw up a quitclaim deed for me?" He paused. "You want to transfer the property?" "I want to be ready," I said, "but not to who he's expecting." Walter knew exactly what to do. He'd known me for 2 decades. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just said, "I'll have it ready by Monday." That Sunday, I called Renee. I told her everything, the measuring, the lawyer inquiry, the Thanksgiving plan I was certain was coming. She was quiet for a long time. "Mom," she finally said, "what do you want to do?" And I told her, every word of it. Renee booked a flight that night. She told Marcus she was coming for Thanksgiving. She didn't mention that she and I had spoken. She didn't mention that we'd spent an hour on the phone with Walter. She just said she missed home and wanted to be there. The week before Thanksgiving, I did 3 things. First, I called the Clearwater Veterans Housing Initiative, a nonprofit that had been working for years to convert donated properties into transitional housing for veterans and their families. I'd donated to them before. Small amounts here and there. Ray had been Army. It felt right. Second, I met with Walter and signed the deed. Not Marcus's deed. Mine. The one transferring the property, the house. The 2 acres. All of it, to the Veterans Housing Initiative. Effective upon my signature with a life estate clause that allowed me to remain in the home for as long as I lived. Rent-free, with full use of the property. The house would never belong to Marcus, but it would also never leave me while I was alive to walk its floors. Third, I cooked. A full Thanksgiving dinner. Turkey, cornbread dressing, sweet potatoes, green beans slow-cooked with ham hock, 2 pies. The whole thing. The kind of meal Ray used to say was worth driving any distance for. If Marcus wanted a performance, I was going to give him one. Just not the one he'd rehearsed. Thanksgiving morning, Renee arrived first. She walked in, hugged me for a long time, then tied on an apron and started helping without being asked. No performance, no agenda. Just her showing up the way she always had. Marcus and Courtney arrived at noon with the kids, 11-year-old Jake and 9-year-old Lily. The kids ran straight to the creek like they always did. Courtney smiled in that careful way she had, like she was managing her face. Marcus gave me a hug that lasted exactly as long as it needed to look genuine. Everything was warm and easy on the surface. Turkey smells filling the house. Football on low in the other room. Kids coming in muddy from the creek and being sent back out to wipe their feet. But underneath the warmth, I was watching. And Marcus was watching me watch him. Though he didn't know I knew what was coming. At some point in the afternoon, I caught him on the porch making a phone call. He had his back to the door. But the sound carried. I heard the word, notary, and the words, after dinner. I went back to the kitchen and put the pies in the oven. Dinner was beautiful, if I do say so. The table looked the way Ray always loved it. Fall flowers in the center. The good china. Candles. The kind of table that makes you feel like the world outside doesn't exist for a few hours. We ate. We talked. The kids were loud and happy in the way kids are when they're allowed to just be kids. Renee kept catching my eye across the table. Small glances that said, "I'm here. I've got you. We're ready." Then, as I was pouring coffee, Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, before we do pie, there's something Courtney and I wanted to talk to everyone about." The table shifted. Lily and Jake didn't notice. But Renee set down her coffee cup. Courtney straightened slightly. I stayed where I was, holding the coffee pot, waiting. Marcus reached into his jacket, which he'd kept on all through dinner. I now realized why, and pulled out a folded document. He set it on the table in front of me. "Mom, I know this isn't the most traditional Thanksgiving conversation. But Courtney and I have been thinking about the future. Your future, and ours." He smiled, the kind of smile that's been practiced. "We think it would make the most sense, for everyone, if the house transferred to us now. While you're healthy and everything is simple and straightforward. No probate, no complications. We'd make sure you're taken care of. You'd still live here. We'd help with taxes, maintenance, everything." He tapped the document. "I had a notary coming by around 8. Just to make it official. Keep everything in the family." The table was very quiet. Jake and Lily had both gone still, picking up on the energy even if they didn't understand it. I set the coffee pot down carefully. I looked at Marcus, then at Courtney, who was staring at her plate, then at Renee, who gave me the smallest, steadiest nod. "You brought a notary to Thanksgiving dinner," I said. He kept smiling. "I wanted to make it easy. Mom, no lawyers, no." "I appreciate that," I said, "because I actually have a document too." I went to the kitchen and retrieved the envelope Walter had prepared. I came back to the table and sat down. Calmly, the way you sit down when you've already won and you're just waiting for the other person to realize it. I picked up Marcus's deed and looked it over. It was exactly what I'd expected. A standard quitclaim deed, my name transferring the property to Marcus James Marsh and Courtney Ellen Marsh. I folded it neatly and set it aside. Then I opened my envelope and set my document on the table. "I actually already transferred the deed," I said. 3 days ago." Marcus leaned forward and read the top of the document. I watched his face go through 3 different expressions in about 4 seconds. Confusion first, then something like relief, thinking maybe I'd transferred it to him early, then the name of the recipient registered. Clearwater Veterans Housing Initiative. "What?" he said. Not a question, just the word. "The house belongs to the Veterans Initiative now," I said, "with a life estate in my name. Meaning I live here for the rest of my life. Exactly as I do now. But when I'm gone, the property becomes transitional housing for veterans and their families." I folded my hands on the table. "Your father would have loved that." Courtney made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Marcus was white. "Mom, you can't, you didn't." "I did," I said, 3 days ago. "It's recorded with the county. It's done." "Why?" His voice had cracked somewhere between the first and second syllable of that word. I looked at my son for a long moment. The little boy who'd caught fireflies in mason jars on this very porch. The teenager who'd mowed this lawn every Saturday in summer because Ray had told him the land teaches you patience. The man who'd shown up to Thanksgiving dinner with a notary booked and a deed in his jacket pocket. Because this house was built on love, I said. Not on transaction. And I will not let it become a transaction. Renee reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Jake looked at his father. Then at me, trying to figure out what had happened. Lily had started picking at her pie crust. Oblivious. Marcus stood up. I need some air. He walked out through the back door onto the porch. The same door Ray used to walk through carrying a fishing pole on Saturday mornings. Courtney sat very still for another 30 seconds. Then followed him. Renee and I finished our pie. The conversation Marcus and I had on the porch an hour later was not the confrontation I'd expected. It was quieter than that. More honest than I'd thought he was capable of being. He'd come back inside eventually. Asked if we could talk alone. Renee took the kids to the creek with flashlights. Courtney said she had a headache and went upstairs. We sat on the porch in the dark, listening to the creek. I wasn't trying to take it from you, he said. I was trying to secure it. For who? A long pause. For us. For the family. Marcus, I said, when your father died, you asked me within the first month whether I was thinking about downsizing. At the funeral reception, you asked about the house. I looked at him. I told myself you were just stressed and didn't know what you were saying. I've been telling myself that for 8 years. He didn't answer. When I was sick last year, the first thing out of your mouth was the house. Not, are you scared? Not, I'll come down and sit with you at the appointments. The house. Courtney, he started. Don't, I said, don't put it on Courtney. You're a grown man. Another long silence. I used to think I wasn't important enough to you, I said finally. I used to think I'd done something wrong. That I'd failed somewhere in raising you, and that was why you looked at me the way you did. Like a problem to be managed. Mom, that's not. But that's not it, I continued. I don't think I failed you at all. I think somewhere along the way, you started calculating the value of everything. Your job, your house, your marriage, your mother, and when you calculated me, what you came up with was, house worth $600,000. Woman who won't live forever. Opportunity window closing. He looked out at the water. The creek made its steady sound, indifferent to what was happening on the porch above it. I love you, Marcus, I said. I will always love you. But I will not sign over the home your father and I built so that Courtney can have a better kitchen. I will not let 40 years of my life become a line item in your financial planning. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not respond at all. What am I supposed to do with that? He finally asked. I think, I said slowly, that you're supposed to sit with it for a while. And think about what kind of son you want to be for whatever time I have left. Not what you want to inherit. What you want to have been. He left early the next morning. Courtney was cool and formal at the door. Marcus hugged me, and it was different from the hug when he'd arrived. Less performance. More confusion. Like he didn't know what the hug was supposed to accomplish anymore. Renee stayed 3 more days. We walked the property every morning. The two of us, coffee in hand, boots wet with dew. She told me about her life in Portland. Her work, a man she'd been seeing who sounded kind and steady. I told her about the pottery class I'd been meaning to take and the mystery novel club at the library in town that I kept saying I'd join. On her last morning, she stood in the kitchen doorway the way she used to as a little girl, 1 foot in. 1 foot out, and said, "Mom, you know I never expected anything from you. The house, the money, any of it, I just wanted you." I set down my coffee cup and held my daughter for a long time. "I know," I said, "that's why you got me." The holidays passed differently that year. Quieter, less performance, less obligation, less pretending that proximity is the same thing as love. Marcus called in December. He didn't mention the deed or the Veterans Initiative or the notary he'd had to send home from my driveway on Thanksgiving night. He asked how I was feeling. He asked about the creek, whether the water level had dropped with the dry fall we'd had. He asked if Ray's old fishing poles were still in the garage. "They are," I told him. "Right where your father left them." "Maybe I could come down in the spring," he said. "Take Jake fishing." "Maybe," I said. And for the first time in years, that word came from a real place instead of an exhausted one. I still live in the house. My porch, my creek, my 2 acres, my life estate, signed and recorded and unbreakable. Some mornings I sit out there with coffee and I think about Ray. About what he'd say if he knew what had happened at his Thanksgiving table. I think he'd probably laugh first, that low, surprised laugh he had when life turned out stranger than he expected. And then he'd get quiet, the way he always did when something mattered. And he'd say, "You did right, Bev." I think I did. There are veterans who will someday walk these floors. Young families who need a stable place to stand while they find their footing. People who earned something real. I like knowing that Ray's house is going to carry that kind of weight when I'm done with it. I like knowing it's going to matter to people who will be grateful. Actually grateful, not as a performance, not as a calculation. As a gift. I joined the Library Mystery Club in January. Signed up for pottery in February. Started going to the Veterans Center on Thursday afternoons. Helping with intake paperwork. Turns out 40 years of bookkeeping is useful in ways you don't expect. I am 69 years old, and for the first time in a very long time, I am not waiting for my son to decide I matter. I already know I do. And that was just the beginning. Because what happened the following spring? When Marcus showed up at my door with Jake and Ray's old fishing poles. And what he said standing on that porch. I never saw that coming either. Subscribe, so you don't miss what comes next.